A few short points I want to share with you guys. I have another little paper here. It's already on Victor, so I'll link it to the bottom. Counter deception in astronomy. Now, counter deception basically means being able to see deception when it's occurring. Deception, in essence, is the distortion of perceived reality. Says here, operationally, it is done by changing the pattern of distinguishing characteristics, which are called charks, of the thing, whether object or event, detected by the sensory system of the target. The task, the purpose of deception, is to profess the false in the face of the real. So magicians do it, they call it magic, or occasionally and privately deception, and specifically a trick or an illusion. Soldiers, intelligencers, psychologists, and animal biologists call it deception. Some military camouflagers call it strategic camouflage. And it says here, reality is distorted, deceptively portrayed by both nature and man. And that's very important. That's the topic of the paper that I wrote. This isn't from the paper. This is Bell and Whaley's Matrix of Deception. You guys can see that. All right. Basically, there are two aspects of deception that that people need to be made aware of. There's dissimulation, which is hiding the real, and there is simulation, which is showing the false. So for deception, the majority of deception, and then you have, your branched off effects. You have a false reality presented, and you have what's real over here being hidden. So it's down here. So now you have the false reality up here, and you have what's real is hidden down here, which creates the deception. Now, with this theory that I'm designing, stellar metamorphosis, the main deception is caused by both nature and astronomers. The first part is nature. Nature, before we had all the information on exoplanets, before the 1990s, nature was only showing us the objects that had strong visible spectrums, the light from very young hot exoplanets, which they call stars. So that being said, they had all these spectrums that were really bright, really visible, in other words. And astronomers have said, oh, well, we see all the visible ones. So instead of saying, well, there's probably stuff that's hidden, nature, without purpose, without intention, was hiding all the stars that no longer shined. So instead of actually looking at that objectively, astronomers, they took the bait, so to speak, and they said, well, okay, we don't see any objects that shine clearly because we don't see them. So what they did is they drew up stellar evolution models, and I put this in the paper, that have stars as always being bright, always shining, always being there. So there we go. There's the simulation. There's the false reality that astronomers presented in lieu of astronomy's dissimulation, or in lieu of nature's dissimulation, which is hiding all the evolved stars. As you can see up here in this diagram, I guess I should keep this up here for reference, I don't know. The astronomers, they only had the bright stars as being the objects that evolve, and they had them like in a closed loop. So naturally, in the 21st century, we're starting to realize that there's much more than what meets the eye as well. We have to sort of humble ourselves again with the reality that, astronomers have been fooled by nature. Nature has fooled them into believing that they had all the information, before they cooked up their stellar evolution ideas. So now we have stellar evolution ideas that are already cooked up and canonized, meaning they've become a dogma. And now we're starting to learn the truth, and we're looking back, it's like, wait a second, this might not be correct, but that's up to astronomers to figure that out. And if they can't, well, they're going to forever be in the dark, and they're going to forever be deceived with misinformation that they have canonized into a dogma. So I mean, nature has done one hell of a job in confusing astronomers. But it isn't just nature's fault, it's the astronomers themselves. They made stellar evolution models very faddish and popular, so, you know, to make a sort of quasi-cohesiveness inside of their groups. And then they made those things true in the groups, and then they perpetuated those falsehoods over many years. So now, you know, it's the truth, and now that we're actually finding out that was the simulation, that was the deception. And we're going back and trying to look at the deception for what it really was. Another part of this paper I have here is Whaley's law of cognitive triangulation. Right there. Now, Whaley's law of cognitive triangulation basically means, now I'll read this out. This is from Victorian medical detective Dr. Joe Bell. It says here, there were two of us in the hunt for Jack the Ripper. He was a serial killer. When two men set out to find a golf ball in the rough, they expect to come across it where the straight lines marked in their mind's eye to it from their original positions crossed. In the same way, when two men set out to investigate a crime mystery, it is where the researchers intersect that we have a result. So basically, triangulation in a sense is where you hit the golf ball, it goes out in front of you, and you have another guy from some other part of the field looking out too, and then you walk forward, and wherever you guys just walk forward, boom, that's where the golf ball is. And if you have a third one, a guy way over here, you can get an even more exact position. Now, with astronomers, I have this in the paper, with astronomers, what they did is they've made it to where the students are so conditioned into believing a specific worldview with certain sets of assumptions, and they force all their students and all the professors to think exactly the same way. And what that does is creates like a tunnel vision of one narrow set of possibilities that points in one direction only. So similar to trying to find a golf ball, if you don't have a methods for triangulating the location for understanding, basically cognitive understanding, you're not going to be able to have any understanding. You can't figure out what's going on unless you have multiple angles of approach towards those mysteries. But what happened is in the astronomy courses, they teach falsehoods. This goes back to the deception thing, the simulation, which not only exacerbates the fact that they're constantly being fooled, but it also makes it to where they only have one worldview that can't have another angle to solve it from, because they reject other angles of approach. They reject other fields of study. They reject other experts in other fields. Only the astronomy experts can know what happens in astronomy. They don't ever go to the geology department. They don't ever go to the math department. They don't ever go to the chemistry department. Only the astronomers can know what astronomers are talking about. And that is a failure to understand the power of triangulating different viewpoints. As well, there was another example I saw. Imagine if you're being followed, like you're walking down the road and you're being followed by somebody. It would be a lot harder for you to look around, to look behind you to see if somebody's following you, rather than to have another person, say from another different angle, watching you, who also can watch from a different angle that person's following you. Because if you just look around, the person following you will be able to duck behind bushes or slide behind a door or mask the fact that they're following you. But from another angle, a person can watch you, and then they can perceive the weird actions of that person that's following you. Then it will make them stick out more. That's just another example. I read that in a little book here. But basically, that's it. And I suggest for people to understand what's happening here is to read a lot of things on deceptions about, about like, what would it be, like detective type situations, to where you have to look at your own bias to see the truth of things. And astronomers these days, they're not trained to look at their bias. They're not trained to examine their assumptions. They're trained to accept what they're told and do as they're told and have a specific narrow worldview, or else, the peer pressure to conform in the status quo will throw you under the bus, and you won't have any career opportunities. But that's basically it. I'll go ahead and link this to the bottom of the page, you guys. Take it easy.